Hello. Okay, we are here. We are live. Woo!
We are live. Hey,
Hey, everybody.
everybody.
We're back with another Wellness Wednesday. I'm going to point out that Dr. Keith has blue hair.
Dr. Keith does have pandemic blue hair. You
Pandemic
taught me
blue.
that trick. Underneath that cap is
It's
purple
purple.
hair.
It's true. So I'm Mary Mitchell Campbell, first name Mary Mitchell, Southern, and this is Wellness Wednesday, which was created with Artists Striving to End Poverty, A-Step, and we are so happy to have you joining us today. We have very special guests.
Thank you. And I'm Dr. Keith Bell. I'm a doctor of acupuncturist in Chinese medicine coming to you from my holistic health clinic in Richmond, Virginia. And we have a very special colleague, an esteemed colleague here today who is joining us from New York City. And I'm excited because she is a local resource for all the people who are watching from New York. We
Nice.
have Dr. Jill Blakeway, who is also a licensed acupuncturist and clinical herbalist. She's the founder of Yanova Center in New York City and the author of 3 books on wellness, health, and healing. Her latest book I have right here is Energy Medicine, The Science and Mystery of Healing, which describes her personal journey as an energy worker and explores the science and mystery behind how energy is transmitted from one person to another. We're going to be talking a lot about this today. We're very excited to have you here. Welcome, Dr. Jill Blakeway.
Yay!
Thank you both. I'm really happy to be here. Thank you.
A lot of our audience is coming from the artistic community. And we got those of us that work on the Broadway scene specifically, but really all of us that work in the arts have gotten some rough news this week where the Broadway League announced that we will definitely not be returning in this calendar year. And I think a lot of us were expecting it. And I think it was still a really big hit to see it in print and to recognize that we still have a very long road ahead of us. So I'm curious, just because mental health has been a challenge for a lot of us, I'm curious if you have any suggestions of things that we can be doing at home um, in alignment with energy work.
Well, yes, and I treat a lot of actors being New York based. I treat a lot of Broadway people and a lot of film and television actors. And your industry is just in limbo. And everybody who works in it, I know, is just has no idea when this will end, which I think is a really difficult thing to get your head around. If you know what you're dealing with, then you can sort of start making your plans. But it's the open-endedness of this. It's like a big serenity prayer for people, because you have to accept the bit you can't change, and yet there are things you can do. And I think when we get really tight and scared, it's hard for us to see possibility. We close ourselves off from possibility. And so a lot of the time with my patients, I've been working on Zoom with them. We are open in New York, but I am here on Zoom. And what I've been doing is guided meditations with them, and we might do one towards the end of this session, where we ground and then we open up, we raise our vibration just a bit, and we open up to resource. And what I want people to know is that when I went on this journey to write this book, Energy Medicine, what I realized is that we're all energetically connected, and that is measurable. HarperCollins asked me to look at the science, what was measurable about energy medicine. And so I looked at what was measurable, and our consciousnesses are connected. So fear starts to spread like a virus amongst us, and it closes us down to possibility. So I start to just help people open up energetically and feel the safety of this moment. Because in this moment, literally this moment, you are safe. This moment is almost always dealable with, and then have some inspiration. And it's easier to do that with artists because they already get inspiration. You know, actors are very intuitive. They pull from the field the whole time. They pick up people and people's feelings, and then they channel them. And good acting is a bit like channeling, actually. And actors describe it to me like it just kind of comes through me. I just let go. And we need this feeling, that same feeling of connection and channeling, I think, for life, as you would if you were acting.
Yes, I can say as an artist, I often do recognize the feeling of channeling. And when you're sort we call it, sometimes call it in the zone, but
Yes.
we definitely absorb energy from the people around us, I think, a lot of us. And so I think you're right about that fear sort of permeating through and trying to make sure that we're not, like, I personally have found it challenging to not take in the energy of just the news and the sort of like world events and the way that's affecting me, and figuring out how to find my center again has been sort of something that I'm personally working on, that I have found pretty tricky.
This last 3 and whatever it is years has been a roller coaster of sort of fear and clenching against things that, you know, clearly we are not in alignment with, most of us. And one of the things that I looked at, one of the studies I looked at in my book, is at the University of Connecticut, they put 2 people in different MRIs in separate rooms. And when one thought healing thoughts about the other, their brainwaves synced up, and it was measurable. You could see the effect on their brainwaves. And then I went from that to wondering, you know, I wonder what happens with me in the clinic. I have strong energy that comes out of my hands, but I've never really known what it was. And I've always doubted it. And, you know, I've had all the questions that I think anyone, you know, responsible would have, like, what if it's just the placebo and I have strong energy and it does absolutely nothing, but people are kind of impressed by it and then they get better. So I started to measure myself for the book, and they put an EEG on my brain and an EKG on my heart. And what they found is that because of my wish to help patients, I think, I had taught myself how to go into internal alignment. And so my heart and my brain go at the same frequency. It's called heart-brain coherence. And when that happens, the patient's heart goes into the same frequency as mine, thanks to something called mirror neurons. Nothing necessarily particularly woo, in fact. And all of that is measurable. And that's without me, I'm an acupuncturist, but I can do my job without needles. And I can actually do my job at a distance too, though I rarely admit to that because I always feel I'm British and I'm very self-conscious about being too woo-woo. I already feel like I'm an acupuncturist. My parents are already appalled. And here I am telling people on Facebook that I could do this without the needles. But it's about putting myself into alignment is what I found. And I didn't know that. I taught myself to do that unconsciously. And I'm not remotely special, incidentally. So if I can do that, everyone can do that. I'm very clear about that.
You talk about in your book, you talk about the idea of resonance. And Mary Mitchell is a music director. I know you understand resonance. And as you said, that the patient's heart and brain start mirroring yours and you resonate at the same frequency. Can you talk about the importance, kind of what Mary Mitchell was saying, that, you know, if we're going to be watching negative news or putting ourselves into these hurtful and harmful and scared states where we shut down, the importance of opening up and resonating. And when we do that, it affects the people around us. It affects the entire industry of Broadway. Could you speak to that?
It does. How we the space we're in starts to affect our reality. And I got my first inkling of this when I looked at some research from Princeton University, from the engineering department at Princeton, who I imagine are the least woo department at Princeton. Don't you think? They make literal machines. Mm-hmm. And back in the 70s, they had a grad student, a female grad student, who wondered if she could make a machine that could be moved by the human mind. And the dean of engineering at the time was a man called Dr. Robert Jean, who I interviewed for my book and who has subsequently died. He was very elderly when I interviewed him, so I was lucky to meet him. He didn't think for a moment she was going to pull this off. He just thought it was a nice project for a grad student to think that through, how you would design that machine. But she did. And she designed a machine, which, to cut a long story very short, and I tell it longer in the book, thanks to decaying atomic material, spits out random numbers. And what they found is that if one person focuses on the machine with feeling, the numbers become a little bit less random. But if more people focus on the machine with shared feeling, then the numbers become less random in a way that is statistically impossible, or was supposed to be statistically impossible. And they were so impressed by these anomalous results and so curious about them that they set up a lab called the Pair Lab. And they ran for about 20 years. And the work is still going on with a group called the Global Consciousness Project. You can look them up online. And they have little portable ones of these machines now. They're called REGs, Random Event Generators. And they've taken them everywhere, to the Trump inaugural, to yoga retreats, churches, all sorts of things. And what they found is that the biggest connector that has the biggest impact on the machine is love and compassion. But close second is fear. And fear spreads like a virus, and it affects the machine. And of course, if it affects a machine, it affects our reality. This is your thoughts and feelings and intentions affecting physical reality. And scientists are beginning to be able to measure that effect, even if they don't completely know how that is transmitted. They can see it is transmitted with machines like this. So that means that we have to be careful about what we do in reaction to fear. And I have thought about this very deeply, you guys, because I don't want to cut myself off and just sort of spiritually bypass and, meditate while the world burns. So I feel the need to be engaged politically. I feel the need to, make my voice heard. And part of that engaging is engaging in fear. But it's what you do in your body. And I think back to my clinic where I feel very safe, with the patients. I'm good at my job, and I love the patients and I love my colleagues. And I go into that kind of internal resonance. And what that does is it makes me into a bit of a channel. I often, like you, I feel like I'm pulling things in from the field. I often say things that are way smarter than me. And I think, oh my goodness, that's way smarter than I am. I wonder where that came from. Well, it's because it doesn't come from me.
Yeah, that happens when you're in the zone.
So we need to not get tight in response to fear. And I think one of the things I've realized for myself is that anger is a very expansive emotion. Anger changes the world. We should be angry. Actually, we should be outraged.
There's a lot of energy in anger.
Yes, anger has energy. And Dr. Keith will tell you in Chinese medicine, if you repress your anger, you start to get what's called liver qi stagnation. You start to get sick. You can't move through your own body. Your qi can't move. But contempt and disdain are anger with fear attached. And they're part of an illusion. We have an illusion of our separateness and our difference to other people. But really, what I learned writing this book and from those studies at Princeton and other studies I looked at is at some level, we are literally all the same thing, not in some kumbaya way. We're literally consciousness, global consciousness. The ancient Chinese called it the Tao, individuated into physical form. And our egos make us jockey for position and look up to some people and look down to other people. But that's just an illusion. That's just an illusion of our separateness. And so if you can cling to that idea, if you can take refuge in the bigger global consciousness, that's why the project that's doing these studies that were started at Princeton is called the Global Consciousness Project. Then you can be angry, change the world, but not contemptuous, diminishing, and disdainful, all of which contract the world that you're operating in.
And that's what it is. It's about expansion and contraction and creation and destruction. And what I'm hearing from you is it's about consciousness. A teacher of mine taught me 20 years ago that he defined prayer as a thought held in consciousness, fueled by emotion. And a lot of people don't realize that thoughts and emotions are separate because a lot of people have a thought and an emotion attached to it. But when you learn to be mindful, you can realize that a thought is simply a thought. We attach an emotion to it. And if we're reacting to life from this emotional aspect and we put a thought with it, we're focusing our energy and we're either creating or destruction. So I think what you were saying is very important when it comes to resonance, that yes, have a thought, feel the emotion, but you can actually transform that emotion. We've been talking about that a lot in Wellness Wednesdays, especially with like positive affirmation. And when you consciously transform your emotion with the thought, it's very powerful. And then it resonates, and it resonates to the people around you.
Yeah. Yes. And you can bring people with you. Anger brings people with you. You don't have to just be positive, sweetness, and light by any means.
Right.
Some of the great movements on earth were started when people had enough and got angry. But you can see you close your field in when you're contemptuous. You make your world smaller when you're diminishing of other people. Whereas when you're expansive, you can bring a lot of people with you because you're resonating.
Right.
I mean, I think we're in a movement right now that was fueled by or sparked by anger that is really, I think, taking off and hopefully creating the kinds of long-lasting change we were looking for. One thing that you made me think about was, there's these studies that in theater, just because that's a lot of my world, that when an audience is watching a show, their heartbeats align. Have you read about that?
Yes, I looked at, because I treat so many entertainment industry people, I talk to theatre people when I was writing this book. Because, for instance, comedians will tell you that they bring the energy of an audience together. And that the problem with hecklers isn't the heckling, it's the disparate nature of it that stops that movement. Same when you're doing a play, you bring the audience with you. And that is a shared experience. And I do want to say that human beings crave that. And we don't get it as easily on Zoom. So I do think that when theatre comes back, people will be desperate to feel that feeling they feel in a theatre. You don't get that even watching a movie where you share the experience with the actors in a way that is about shared consciousness, not just shared experience. So I do think, eventually, when we get through this, people will be rushing back to group events, same with music concerts and things like that, live music, because nothing really makes you feel as alive, as or as part of something as that shared experience as an audience member. And yes, people's heart waves start to align. Well, I looked at research that showed that when one person interviews another and is listening closely, the person they're interviewing's heart waves start to show up in their brain waves. And you can measure that, you can see that. So we are impacting each other in that way.
Right now.
Yeah,
Sierra Boggess.
Your heart's like an antenna, it turns out. And you can measure the field around the heart 15 feet away. And doctors measure it the whole time when they do an EKG and things. It's just that we haven't looked at what impact that has on other people. We've just looked at it from a sort of slightly reductive cardiovascular view. But we start to affect people with our heart waves and with our brain waves, and in ways that are magical and move us, and not just emotionally, but move life forward.
Yeah.
Well, two things. Oh, sorry, Mary Mitchell.
No, go ahead.
Sierra Boggess, when we had her on our second episode as an actress, she talked about she reached out into the audience and brought them into a new reality. And she did that consciously as an actress. So that's saying what. So I just wanted to mention that. But another thing, Jill, is we're talking about energy medicine, and a lot of people think that energy medicine is woo-woo. But you mentioned EKGs, and what a lot of people do not realize is that conventional Western medicine uses energy medicine every day to diagnose and treat diseases. They use EKGs, they use ultrasounds, they use EMG. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yes, we're really just talking about frequency and wave, and it's part of Western medicine. And, energy medicine itself is a very broad field, obviously, ranging from people like Dr. Keith and myself, who are acupuncturists, which is a form of energy medicine, to people who are more sort of hands-on healers and things like that. But when I explain it to my patients, I always say that your energy is really every bit of you that isn't skin and tissue and bone and organ, which is, the rest of you. So it's your memories and your thoughts and your beliefs and your feelings, but it's also your body's awareness, which is the bit of your body you take for granted. If you have a couple of extra drinks at dinner, your liver just kicks in, hopefully, unless you do it too often, and sorts things out. If you get an insect bite, you get a histamine reaction. Your body has awareness, and it's a guided awareness. And what it does is it uses awareness of its situation to try and bring you back into balance. And when people get sick, particularly chronic illnesses, those are often sicknesses of lack of communication within the body. Things are just out of sync. Organ systems stop communicating properly with each other. I do a lot of fertility medicine. My first book was called Making Babies. And often when someone is suffering from infertility, the reproductive system is just minutely synchronized. And there's just a synchronization off. So the endometrial lining, the uterine lining isn't ready at the right time when the embryo arrives and things like that. That all requires awareness. And it's a form of intelligence. It's not intellectual intelligence, and it bypasses your mind. You don't think, oh, I must speed up my heart rate now in order to run, or I must ovulate right now. But your body does, and those happen automatically or autonomically. Those reactions, they are awareness, and that is part of your chi, as we would say in Chinese medicine. And I don't think it's any accident that every single ancient culture understood that we were more than just flesh and bone and tissue and organs. And they understood that we were consciousness. And they called it different things. The Greeks called it pneuma. In the Judeo-Christian tradition, it was the breath of life. In India, it was called prana. The Chinese call it chi. And the only people who didn't was, modern Western cultures who ditched that. But the truth is, we have awareness, we have consciousness. And as Dr. Keith said, when we're meditating, we can watch our mind. Our awareness is even bigger than our mind. It is, we can watch it. Who's doing the watching? Well, you are. Your consciousness is. And I put it to you that it's bigger than that. Your consciousness is as tiny as every little cell that knows where it is and what it wants to do, and as big as all of us, as our collective consciousness. And it's all the same awareness. So the awareness in your body that keeps bringing you back into homeostasis, bringing you back into line, is the exact same awareness in the greater field that keeps bringing us back. And human beings would not have lasted so long if we didn't. Look at us, it's a complete mess. But there is intelligence moving in the universe.
And people need to be reminded of that.
Yes.
And you need to say that again.
There is intelligence moving in the universe, and you can tap into it, but you have to open up rather than close down. And that's what I teach my patients to do. Because then if you are a performer or work in the theatre in some way, and you do not know what your future is going to look like in the near future, I think we can be confident at some point you'll come back with gusto, but right now things are really hard. There is a lot of safety in opening up, which is the opposite of what you want to do. You want to just curl into a ball and put the sheets over your head, and feeling that intelligent movement in your life. And once you start to let it in, coincidences happen, synchronicities happen, you meet people, people say things. And I watch this all day with my patients. I just open them up to what I see as source energy, intelligence, pure awareness. And they the next week when I see them, they're like, you will never believe what happened to me. And so did this, and then I found that, and then I was offered a job here. And so our instinct in troubled times is to close down. But if we can learn not to, and lean in, really lean in to the same awareness that balances your cells, you'll find magic happens.
That's what we were talking about last week during the manifestation meditation. People forget to open. They say what they want, they state what they want, but at some point you have to, like you said, lean in or lean back and say, I'm open to receive it. And synchronicity is amazing. I mean, it's the way I've run my life. Basically, you remain open and things just start to unfold. Mary Mitchell, you were going to say something?
Well, I was just going to say, I mean, you're right. I think it goes against your instinct. Your instinct is to want to shut down. But it also reminds me of, so much of the work we do in sort of preparing performances is getting out of our own way. There's so much of, especially for singers, like there's certain exercises I will have people do to just connect to their breath again because they have lost that connection, or tricking your body into doing certain things by just not thinking about them in a way that lets your body do what it wants to do naturally, and it all sort of falls into place. But around the idea of tricking your mind and body, I'm curious about, you talk a lot about placebo effect, and I'm so curious about it because it's a fascinating topic to me. Can you explain to people like how that works?
Well, yes, I wrote a whole chapter about placebos because they are very interesting, more interesting than people think. And one of the misconceptions is that people take a placebo and they just feel better, but they don't get better. That isn't true. People use their minds or can trick their minds into changing their body chemistry. And there was a really interesting study at the University of Turin, one of many studies like this, where they took Parkinson's patients and gave them saline and told them they were giving them dopamine, which is what they need. And they produced their own dopamine in response to it. And that was measurable. So if you see your thoughts and your feelings as just part of your chi, it's the part of you, it's part of your body's intelligence. It's the part of you that isn't skin and tissue and bone. You can use your thoughts and your feelings and your intentions to prompt your body to heal. And when I went on this journey to write this book, I went all over the world. I was so lucky. I spent weeks weeks in Japan with some extraordinary healers, one of whom is still teaching me on Zoom to this day. And I met some amazing people. And what I realized is that there are many ways to prompt your body to heal itself. Your body has, I mean, sometimes your body has too much pressure on it and it can no longer come back into balance. And that is a really good time for pharmaceuticals. And Dr. Keith will tell you, I'm not one of those practitioners who is adverse to Western medicine at all. I just think, you know, whatever you need, you should have, myself included. But I'm very interested in how you can prompt your body to heal itself. And certainly your mind can do that, and your beliefs can do that. And I have a great story of a young man who is a sound healer. Would you like to hear it?
Yes.
Actually, I think you'll really like the story because it really illustrates what we're talking about. So towards the end of my book, I interviewed a young man called Madhu Anziani. And Madhu, when he was in college, when he was 23, fell out of his dorm room window and broke his neck. And his spinal cord was 99% severed. He spent a long time in a coma in hospital. And when he came round, he was told that he would be tetraplegic. And he said to me, Jill, I wasn't stupid. I knew that I, in all probability, was going to spend the rest of my life in a wheelchair, but I never allowed the belief to permeate my body. And I tried to live in joy. That's a direct quote. Because when I interviewed him, he's still quite a young man, but at 23, I thought that showed extraordinary presence of mind that I wouldn't have had myself at that age, or may not even now. So I was so impressed by this idea. I never allowed that belief to permeate my being, and I tried to live in joy. So Madhu lay in his hospital bed, and he started to make noises. And if you have had a spinal cord injury, a cervical spinal cord injury, it's really hard to make noises because your diaphragm doesn't move. So this is not an easy thing to do. But he started to sing in tones, and he felt the movement through his body of the sound. And he had the common sense to know that if he could feel the movement of the vibration in his body, he had some spinal cord left, which he did. He had 1%, very little, as it turned out. And he got really into tones. His friends taught him mantras, and someone bought him a prayer wheel, and his dad would lift him up and help him move the Tibetan prayer wheel, and he would sing and chant and things. And a nurse said to him, I think quite well-meaningly, Madhu, you have to stop this. You need to work out how to be the best tetraplegic you can be, not just think you're going to walk. And he said, no, I'm going to walk out of here. And 3 months later, he did. He walked out of the hospital on a walker, not necessarily well, but he walked. And a year later, he told me, and this is a direct quote, I got on a plane and went back to see my family in New York like a normal person. And what I like about this story is that he had really great care. He was in San Francisco. He was at UCSF. He had fabulous neurosurgeons. He had really good physical therapy. He had great nursing and great occupational therapy. But the thing that made the difference was A, his state of mind. He didn't allow it to permeate his being. And B, his understanding of vibration. And because of that, he became a sound healer, which is what he does this day. He uses sound to heal people, so he's part of your industry at the healing end, and you can look him up, Madhu Anziani, and you can listen to his beautiful, beautiful music, which is an expression of his beautiful soul. And I was so proud to tell his story, and I wanted to tell people that story because it is, to me, the epitome of a story that brings everything together for healing. Mm-hmm. Science, Western medicine, other people, community. He had a very tight community of friends and family, and but also vibration and what that does, and belief.
Yeah, that is so powerful. That
Wow.
is so powerful.
Yeah.
And it's so inspiring and encouraging for like people who do what I do for a living, which is a lot of times in concerts. I tour a lot with Kristen Chenoweth, and a lot of our concerts feel like they are healing events for people.
Yes.
They are. We're the Sondheim concert that we talked about last week when we had Raul on. I mean, the one thing that happened, the number one comment when this concert began was, I am being healed, because people had been so in isolation They didn't know what to do. You all came on, you began to perform, and healing occurred. And it's kind of like what you're saying too, um, Jill, that you can do it through Zoom. Tell us
Yes.
about that.
Yeah,
Tell us about
I
that.
need to know more about this.
Yes.
Well, what I do is I sort of design little healing journeys for people. And I started this when we were first on lockdown. I have 3 centers in New York. And we had to close all of them, which was that same curveball that we're talking about, where it's just a big serenity prayer. And I kept all my staff on, but it was hard, financially hard. And I started to think deeply about how I use needles in the clinic and how I could replicate that at home with people. And I realized, your mind is part of your chi. I can use people's mind and intention if I design a journey for them, and I can draw on all my Western medicine knowledge. I can draw on all my energetic anatomy. I can draw on all my Chinese medicine diagnostics. I can draw on all my herbology and send them herbs. So I listen to people deeply, which I like. And people, if you ask them, will tell you everything about what's wrong. Seriously, it's sort of extraordinary. People know, they don't even know they know, but at some point they will tell you about an experience in childhood or something, and it'll be the key to the whole.
They always know. They
always
know.
It may not be at the forefront of their conscious mind, but they do know. And when they get relaxed enough. And so the first thing I do, and I believe this is really important, and I believe this is important in clinic too, is I create very safe space, which is easy for me to do because I don't see as a separate. Yeah. So you asked me how I wanted to be referred to, and I was like, I'm not remotely hierarchical before we came on. That's because I just don't see as a separate. Yeah. So I don't care. You could call me what you like, and I would be completely happy. So I establish safety where people know that I won't judge them, that I'm not feeling superior, that I'm not remotely self-righteous. They can tell me things. It's all good. I know that being a human being is hard because I am one, and I am so not perfect. So we just start from that standpoint. And then I get a sense of what's wrong and how it's affecting them physically. And then I probably prescribe some herbs and give some advice about diet and lifestyle and things like that. But then I spend a good proportion of the session teaching them how to ground their physical body and make a separation between their physical body and their awareness, so they can use that awareness and move it around their body. And then I use my knowledge of both Western anatomy and energetic anatomy to bring their awareness to different places, just like I would with an acupuncture needle, in fact. And it feels extremely relaxing. And the patients tell me they start to see colors. It's very trippy. I do too. It's very trippy for me too. And what I'm doing is creating a connection at that level we talked about, at the supra-consciousness, at the level where we are all connected. And I find that as I do it, I start to pick up things. I can feel where they're stuck. I start to know things. The other day, I was with a woman whose boyfriend had died during this horrible COVID epidemic. And you imagine being on lockdown with all the stuff around you and nobody to take care of you in the place where you lived with someone. Awful. And out of nowhere, I came up with his pet name for her. And out of nowhere, and I couldn't possibly have got it. I wouldn't have guessed it. And that's that connection. I'm not a psychic by any means, but I start to feel that connection. And it's a very intuitive and creative process for me. I really enjoy it. And it's very healing for the patients. And then over time, we just go deeper and deeper. And we start to peel off the layers of pain that people have accumulated in their body. And the pain people accumulate in their body has thoughts attached to it. It has a voice, and it's often driving you in ways that are not helpful. Usually at the bottom of it is, I'll be all alone and I won't survive, is usually at the bottom. But it's, you have to do this, or this will happen, you must do that, and you should be this or this. And there's a whole sort of like corkscrew going into your being with, and then that and that and that. And at the end of it is, or you'll just be alone, nobody will love you and you won't survive, is usually at the bottom. And so we root out the pain bodies, we uncorkscrew them. We unscrew them together. And that's what I do.
That is
And you
amazing.
know what? When you describe it, I know to some people it sounds painful when you say root out and unscrew and pull out the pain bodies, but it's actually not.
It's not.
It's not.
And
It's
you
a
can do
really
this other
direct.
way. I mean, this is what therapy does, talk therapy, but that takes a long time. You're sort of talking your way out of it and reprogramming and reframing things. This is more energetic. So we're just moving it out. So it's less painful than reliving your
Than
memories.
reliving. Yeah,
Yeah.
I love the
And I get
fact that
people to just breathe it out. Like we don't need to get
Mhm.
entranced by an old story at this point. Like we don't need
Right.
to tell it again. We've told our old
And it's
story.
usually never true anyway. You know, we know memories are only 50% true. So the stories
Yes.
that we tell ourselves are not necessarily what really happened. So, you know, that's just what I love about energy medicine and acupuncture is you bypass the story.
Yes.
You know?
That's a really good point. Memories are only 50% true. Okay, that just hit me hard
At
because I'm like,
most,
oh,
at
yes,
most.
that is so real because we come up with our own narrative. We like we rewrite it.
Reinterpret.
That's
Yes, and in fact, memories are probably not stored in the brain, which is kind of mind blowing. In the book, I looked at research on rats, poor rats, and this is actually horrible. This horrible research on rats, but they tried to look for memory in the rat brains, and they taught them a maze, and then they cut away bits of their brain to see when they would forget how to go through the maze to get the food. I know, horrible, but they couldn't find the place where the memory was stored. And the most up-to-date research thinks that a lot of our memory is pulled from the field.
Well, right.
We're storing it. The field around the brain is very measurable and is almost as big as the field around the heart. And we're pulling information from it the whole time. Actors are pulling from it when they're channeling, when they're acting. Audiences are pulling from it when they all start to come together. And there is some thought that, in fact, the reason that you can't find where memory is stored in the brain, you can find where it's processed. But you can't find where it's stored, is because we're actually pulling memory from a field bigger than us.
wow. That
Yeah.
is amazing.
No.
Earlier in this conversation, you referenced comedians and how comedians feed off, and it made me think of there's two. I've worked with many, but two that I can think of in this moment who do this. Two brilliant comedians, Nathan Lane, Kristen Chenoweth, both of whom would walk out show to show, sort of scan the audience, and the audience would affect so much of how they timed things or delivered things or played with the audience in this way that was like, if you were in my position where you got to watch it over and over and over again with just the audience changing, you would start to realize how much that energy comes into play in this just incredibly tangible way
Yes.
that people
And
have no
that
idea about.
that's
So,
how it's done. And very few people have the ability to be present enough. And I think it takes experience as a performer, because you have to be very not scared of, this is like walking a tightrope. And in
Yes,
this days
you're-
of cancel culture, people get more and more scared of just saying the wrong thing or doing the wrong thing. But I think particularly comedians who literally walk that tightrope where they're saying the next thing that comes into their head, and nobody's more surprised than them when it comes out of their mouth. But if you can open up and trust, which I think does take some experience, then you are being spontaneous, you're being present. And that authenticity audiences pick up on and relate to. Obviously, authentic people are very relatable.
so
And yes.
you two are bringing up something very important, and I think it's why you and I, Mary Mitchell, decided to start this Wellness Wednesday, where we bring professionals of the creative arts and the healing arts together. Because so I think this is a very important topic because Mary Mitchell, a lot of your friends live their life opening up to an audience,
Yes.
and so now they don't have that connection. And
And
what
it's
Jill is saying is they can have that connection even from home. There's a way to open up from home and tap into that energy. And that may be, what these artists and performers need right now is to understand that just because there's no audience doesn't mean that the field is gone. The field is still there.
yeah, that's really
I think you're right. And I always tell my patients, inspiration is called after the in-breath for a reason. You're pulling information in, you know, and creative people channel information. They pick up information, they synthesize from this field, this vibrant matrix of energy that we live in where we're all connected. And that's what people are missing. If people have been doing that live, then that is a big loss, because that is when you're doing it, it feels like the best thing.
You're connected.
You're connected.
You're
And what do
completely
human
connected.
beings want more than that? To be connected to each other. But you can still do it. I do it through Zoom. And you can still create connection, but the first thing you have to do is open back up. And if you're used to opening up in front of an audience, if you have the experience as a performer that when you get on stage, you have learned not to be scared and tight, but to be brave and open and bring them in, then you're just going to transfer that skill to your newfound reality that you didn't ask for, your serenity prayer bit of this, and start to, what would it be like if I created that same spontaneous presence that I create on stage, where I am feeding off the audience and they are feeding off me and we are connected? What if I had that same feeling in my body, even though I've been, you know, sent home to my apartment in Astoria? What would that feel like? I say that because most of my Broadway patients live in Astoria.
Nice. We like Astoria.
Astoria. They're all in Astoria in their apartments if they haven't found someone with a house in the country to go and stay with. Yeah. So
They're all staying at Mary Mitchell's house on the weekend.
They're all staying at Mary Mitchell.
My house. Not a problem at all. That is truly, truly amazing. And if people want to find you to try to get a session with you, is that something?
Yes, I am actually, and I haven't seen new patients for 10 years because I have a big team at Unova. But when this all started, I realized it required experience, like telemedicine done properly in our field. I realized I could bring all my experience to it and really learn some new things myself, which I did, and help people. So you can just go to unova.com, unovacenter.com, YINOVA, center the American way.com. I always have to say that because I'm English.
You know, I was prepared
my
to do that
still
for
can't
you.
find my website because he can't spell center the American way. And you can book online with any of us.
And you have 30 amazing practitioners in Flatiron, East Side, Brooklyn Heights.
Yes,
So
they're awesome, and we're all back open. We're going slower. And we're wearing masks, and we've got a lot of protection in place, and we're not as busy as we were. We're just taking one patient at a time so that we can keep everybody safe. But we are open, and we are filling back up, which is good.
That's fantastic. Dr. Keith, you're practicing again too, right?
yeah, I'm practicing here. I'm here by myself because, you know, we're trying to follow the strict guidelines. So I'm here doing acupuncture.
Yep.
Yeah. I'm not doing, you know, I do all of my initial evaluations this way, but then people come in for acupuncture. But yeah, I'm excited. So the New York community that follows us, I'm excited that you're there to help them.
Me too. Me too. I'm glad, because it sounds like there's a lot of places for people to go.
And I can help anyone on Zoom. I
you
have
can help
patients from wherever. That was the revelation of this. From my bedroom, which is where I am now, I've reached the world. So I have patients in the Middle East and Paris. I have people in Texas and California and Italy and a British contingent, as you can imagine. And that has been one of the joys. And one of the things that I have learned is we're all in the same boat. You know, we've all been sent home. And we're all worried. And how often does that happen?
And to learn more. So you can learn techniques in her book. So she has all of the techniques on how to open and be receptive and to resonate in energy medicine. It's a great book.
I wanted to give people the techniques because I have a chapter on charlatans or just a section. And some of the people I met who were the most dangerous and destructive were people who were trying to have power over other people. You know, by using their skill. And I don't know whether you've seen the Bikram documentary, but that's an example of someone with talent who then used it to manipulate and have power over people. And so I realized it was really important. The best way to give people their power back is to tell them they can do this themselves, which they absolutely can. And that there aren't special people, there aren't special healers. Some of us have some experience, and that's good, but there isn't some, special cohort of people. There are people with talent, just like there are actors with talent and singers with talent, but who've worked at it and honed their skill. But anyone can do this, and so I gave exercises at the end of each chapter so that you could start to live in this kind of way and practice energy healing in your own life and with your family and friends.
And that's what it takes. It takes practice and cultivation.
Yeah,
it does.
So we're coming to our fun part of the end of Wellness Wednesday, but we're coming to our fun part. We're coming to our lightning round. And so, Jill, go ahead.
You have a special prop because we have to.
I have my prop.
Yeah.
So in one of your interviews, Jill, we laughed because you casually mentioned that you worked for the Queen.
Yes.
I was amazed. I was amazed.
So you work for the Queen. So Quarren Queen is here. I'm the Quarren Queen of Richmond, Virginia. I have my tiara. And we're going to now bestow upon you the title of Lady Blakeway of Astoria.
Why not?
And we're going to do our lightning round. So I'm just going to ask you a few questions and you tell us the answer. Here we go. What's your favorite thing to do for self-care?
Oh, bath. I love a good bath.
A good bath. That is a good thing. What do you do first thing in the morning?
I set my intention. I set the mood for the day. I try and, set an intention that'll carry me through everything in the day.
All right. What's your favorite food?
Oh, I love all food. This is such a difficult question. And I know what I'm supposed to say. I know I'm supposed to say salmon and greens, but you know what? I make a lovely bowl. My husband will tell you I make a lovely bowl with grains in the bottom and then lots of veggies and some protein and sauces and things. No two bowls are ever alike in our household. I can churn that out. Tonight I'm cooking butternut squash with pasta though.
Yum.
I'm going to go and peel some squash after this.
We're going to do that. Beach or mountains?
Beach.
Where do you think of as home?
Oh, it's funny. I'm a bit rootless having lived abroad for so long. I do still think of Britain as home, but I haven't lived there for 25 years. So when I go home, it doesn't necessarily feel like home. So it gives you perspective living in a foreign country for a long time. It gives you perspective on the country you live in and also the country you come from. And I see that as the trade-off.
Right. Sure. How do you deal with being angry? Move. Anger is not good in your body, but nor is it good if you just use it destructively, if you start to turn it into contempt. Yeah. So the thing to do is run, punch, an inanimate object, not another human being. Sing moves stuck energy. You can sing or just yell. I'm in the woods. I can just yell. Nobody would call the police or an ambulance. By the way, sometimes when I put acupuncture needles in patients, I have them sing because it's good for vibrating. Yeah. What sound do you love?
Oh, the human voice, I think. I love, yes, okay. Human beings.
And our last question, if you were a spice, what spice would you be?
Ooh, cinnamon, I think. I'm warming.
Cinnamon's a good one.
Cinnamon's a great one.
Cinnamon Lagoon.
This was so great. This was so great. Jill, you're the best for coming on.
Mm-hmm. You are now Lady Blakeway.
Well, thank you. I love being Lady Blakeway of Astoria. Bless you in your tiara.
Bestowed to you by the Quarren Queen of Richmond.
You are awesome, the pair of you. Thank you so much.
Thanks for joining us. It's amazing, the information, and I love it. Definitely, people get the book. Mary Mitchell, who's coming next week? You're going to tell us about our guest?
Yes, we have Broadway star Josh Lehman, who is going to be talking with us about laughter and the ways laughter can affect self-care.
And we do have a NC-17 rating for next week, right?
We do have an NC-17 rating for next week. If you know Josh Lehman, You know why.
Thank you, Dr. Jill Blakeway. Thank you, Mary Mitchell Campbell. Check out Yanova Center, YNOVA Center, theamericanway.com. Check out astep.org. Thanks for having us. We'll see you next week for Wellness Wednesday.
Thanks, everybody.